Thank you everyone for joining us this morning. We're very grateful for your time. We know everyone's dead busy, but hopefully we've got some interesting stuff to talk about today. This is called Code Talks. We were keen just to kind of have a forum whereby we can talk about some really interesting topics once a month, bring in a few friends and family from different agencies and yeah, just I guess share with you some best practice that we've been looking at the last couple of years, some trends maybe from clients that we've observed that might be of interest. But actually it's more a forum for you guys just to like get involved really and ask questions about the things that we're talking about and yeah, just lean into the conversation, because the last thing you want is for us four to talk for the next hour or so probably. So welcome to Code Talks. Today and this month, we're going to talk about how to create effective teams. Now, this is a broad topic, and it ranges from team ways of working, things like capabilities planning, things like in-housing strategies, and even out-housing strategies. You know, how do you bring together the right mix of people to get a good outcome? It also steps into things like cultural redesign and organizational design. So again, some really deep-seated kind of like restructuring challenges, perhaps under the banner of effectiveness. A lot of this stuff has kind of gathered a lot of pace. We feel, certainly, having spoken to a lot of clients over the last maybe 2 years or so, this sense of like effectiveness is really hot topic around the board table at the moment. So we're going to be talking about this as a core theme. Today we're actually co-sponsor, co-talking in conjunction with We Are Adam, who are old mates of ours. So yeah, We Are Adam, for those that don't know, for 15 years now, they've been helping ambitious businesses find great talent across marketing, digital tech, and HR. Leon, you can speak better than me, I'm sure, about your own place, but forgive me for getting that there or thereabouts.
You did a good job, Steve.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks, I'll keep going. But I guess importantly, I suppose, like in terms of like making sure talent lands properly into an organization, making sure that their talent strategy is aligned actually with their growth planning, is all part of having an effective kind of team growth plan as well. So really proud and really pleased that Adam and the guys can join us and talk about this challenge around effective teams. So I guess, why did we choose to talk about team effectiveness? Well, I guess as an organization, we're a digital product business and service business. We help clients and businesses get ready for the future by making things together. And creating effective teams, we think, is what, like, all businesses want to do that, right? So everyone's trying to make the best of what they've got to get to a good future. But having spoken to loads of businesses, it's always fascinating how different those ambitions are, and like creating an effective team is really different for every business we speak to. So from like example, we have you know, from large traditional businesses looking to transform the way they get things done, often with existing people, often with existing perhaps external consultancies, but often then finding that in this new world that there's actually whole teams of people missing from their organization. So how do they go about doing that? How do they go about improving and maturing the way they get things done to create effectiveness? And then the opposite is true for things like startup businesses and people that we've worked with who've got, you know, sort of small and beautiful teams. They might have a runway to spend money towards an exit for the investment that they've got. They're also looking to secure great talent, making sure that talent works really hard, but equally need bandwidth to get to market faster, perhaps. So, you know, they're not self-sufficient always. And so, like, you know, if businesses are increasingly looking outside of their walls for support, like, how does that all hang together? And I think as well, like, I've seen new people emerging around the client teams. So, you know, 4 years ago, we wouldn't have had like a CXO or perhaps even a transformation officer. But now we're seeing much more of those kind of roles appearing just within the day-to-day conversations we have with clients. So the face of the client team is changing quite dramatically and has done for a number of years now, and it's not showing any signs of stopping, frankly. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Like, how do you create an effective team, given that the context of all of that is quite broad, really, and specifically niche to each business. Well, there are some broad themes and there are some things that you can do, and hopefully this will be a session where we can talk about the things that we've certainly learned and ways in which we might advise you guys to think about the future. So on to the panelists then. So I look after new relationships at Code. So I speak to a bunch of clients at the very early stages. So I get to hear some of their challenges, which is great. So I'll chip in as best as I can during this talk with the sort of three colleagues and chums there on the slide of the people who will drive the content. So I'm going to embarrass Gemma now by giving her a bit of an overview, because I know she hates this bit. But Gemma is possibly a one-person agency in many ways. She's got an extraordinary amount of skill and loads of experience working for a variety of businesses over the last 13 years. She's worked through delivery, client operations. She's worked through now commercial. She's helped with pitching stuff. You know, she's really multifaceted. So, and also been the anchor in which Code have redeveloped and repositioned the way in which we run our teams, actually, from an effectiveness point of view. So, hello to you, Gemma.
Hi.
Oh, you're there. You're there. That's great. The good news is this monologue ends soon. So, good news. Then we have Leon, who is a very old friend of the business, who's one of the founders at We Are Adam. And yeah, his ambition is to again, like, help organizations find the right talent against their growth plans, and you know, find great people and keep hold of them, importantly. And again, in terms of that sense of like augmented teams, clients and agencies working together, then I think I'm looking forward to what Leon's got to say about some of those things. So hello to you, mate. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for having us.
Hey, not a problem. It's great to have you on this. I think it wouldn't probably work without your view. So really pleased to have you on board. And then we've got Ant. So Ant, again, works across multiple businesses, including people like Toyota and Lexus. He's also worked with Carex and like a bunch of other like international businesses and brands across kind of global digital marketing and multi-channel e-commerce, etc. So really looking forward to hearing what Ant's got to say about the changing face of the client teams, and how some of the things he's observed around the theme of effectiveness. So hello to you, Ant.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Not at all. Good to see you. Right. So we're going to kick off. A couple of house rules though, quickly. This is your session, not ours. So please do ask questions now or later. And we will get round to asking those at the end. So we'll save some time for that. Don't worry about that. We are recording this and it is going to be on YouTube. So if for whatever reason you drop out or anything else, then it's going to be available permanently on there. And in terms of like, you know, best practice around mics and videos, keep yourself muted if you can, please. And if you really want to show your face, you're more than welcome to. It'd be good to see you. So yeah, feel free to do that. Okay, great. So the first thing really is just my little setup, I guess, like, you know, all the things that I've seen in the last sort of 2 or 3 years, whether you're talking to somebody about like a business change initiative they want to do from a coaching and a team point of view, or whether it's simply replacing like a website or something else, or even a marketing plan or a campaign plan, like the team effectiveness of that thing is absolutely critical to it being a success. And for like super strategic stuff like business and organizational missions, like why do we even exist? Like how you go about crafting a team of people to create an effective answer to that is really vital, all the way down to like things like the service that you deliver or the departmental structures that the business has, the people and the skills that you hire, like who do you need and why do you need them and when do you need them and how do they augment with the other people around them, things like playbooks and ways of working. Like it's a really rich and fascinating, to me anyway, like tapestry of moving parts that I think is like endlessly interesting. And I'm dead keen to hear like what you guys think about some of these things. But we've got like 4 key questions that we've framed this morning around. So I'm going to jump straight into the first one, which is this really, I guess. Clients are on a journey all the time. Like it's forever changing in terms of the market and the business growth and the challenges there. And the people that underpin that are really important, of course, and they make the thing happen. But I guess rather than it being like a case of, you know, once upon a time, an agency would be given a brief and then you do something and like deliver it back in a kind of sort of very remote way. I think clients now are reaching out much more to agencies to drive not only the way in which the things deliver, but actually the talent plans and the ways in which their people are growing. And Jem, I'm going to put this one to you because I know you spent some time in this space. So what do you think is going on?
So I suppose the quickest answer and why they're coming to people like us is time. They've not got that time to be doing that internally, and skill set. So I think one of the beauties of coming to a company like Code or any of the other companies that do what we do and bringing them in is we've got that luxury of working for lots and lots of different industries. So we can come into any business and apply some solutions that might have come out of the car industry, for example, and we can go into like an online retailer and apply them there. So I think businesses are realizing that they've got no choice but to develop the people. People want more now from the companies that they work for. So yeah, they're coming to us and asking for that support.
And what do you think it is about, like, why, like, again, like 4 or 5 years ago, clients would have just reached out to like a training provider, wouldn't they? Or maybe some sort of coaching organization that did lean perhaps, or just did project management, or Prince 2 for those that can remember Prince 2. So like, what's been the shift then away, or maybe not so much away from those providers, but perhaps into agency relationships where they've never really been seen as coaches? What's that all about, do you think?
I think without devaluing those types of businesses, because they do have value, I think what we've got, or types of businesses like ours have got, is that lived experience. So it's practical, not just theory. And a lot of the time, we will coach by doing, so not necessarily come into an organisation and run a load of workshops, but come into an organisation, observe their regular ways of working, and then offer feedback and support and guidance in that way. So much more practical, less classroom style teaching.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think as well, partly to that, I think, is that sense of like augmentation. Again, I think that we're seeing clients, want to just bolster their existing capabilities with people that like us. And it might not be a big team, it might be a very specific number of people doing specific roles. But as part of that relationship, then we can coach as we go. Is that the thing you're alluding to there? Yeah,
for sure. So we'll often do a lot of like marking off of certain people. So going in and working with your counterpart at the client, in the client space, and supporting them in that sense.
Yeah, and what about things like, when it comes to like cross agency or cross business ways of working, like what have you seen there that kind of allows that to happen effectively?
Leon or anybody else want the mic for a minute?
I was just going to add to the previous point on that, Steve. I think what we're seeing is that businesses are so deep in the day-to-day detail and execution and tactics of having to do that they're really leaning on businesses and consultancies and agencies like yourselves to come in and offer that strategic nous and that external viewpoint, which might just unlock one blocker or something that might then enable them to really expedite their journey or solve a problem quicker. That's what we're noticing, why we're seeing a lot of agencies and consultancies like yourselves are really how they're adding value to all their clients.
Yeah, I think, and I'll jump in and give you the perspective from a client point of view. I mean, from my perspective, if you look at digital capability, skills and competencies, they're evolving so quickly. And then obviously with the recent COVID outbreak, that completely shifted the paradigm for most businesses. And this is where I think agencies can really add value, because they have a broader outward looking view across many different categories and brands that can then start to influence what your organization needs to look like. So for me, you're working with agency partners, you treat them as an extension of your overall business. And then you learn from them as you're going along, and you can make a conscious decision. This is what we used to do, was, do we want to bring those capabilities in-house, or is someone always going to be better at them than us? And at that point, you can then make a decision of the internal versus partner mix and how that starts to look.
Yeah, and in terms of like, I guess, we've seen in the last 5 years, certainly more mature businesses are, rapidly upscaling their internal capabilities. They've got like product teams, internal. Like once upon a time, they might have used external providers. Like, are you seeing that to be a continuing trend, or is that something that we might see slow down, or how does that look to you?
I think it's going to be a continuing trend. And the one thing I will do, I'll take a step back here, because it depends on the philosophy and the culture of the organization. So you have some organizations where they want to have those capability internally, where some organizations want to more and more lean. And then sometimes there's some, organization that sort of sit in the middle. From my point of view, as I talked about there, product management has been around for a long time, but it's become more prominent now with, the emergence of digital businesses where digital is at the core of the organization, and these roles then become more amplified, and the need to have those roles becomes more, more comprehensive. It then means that actually to try and recruit this talent in becomes really difficult. So actually, if you've got this really aggressive growth journey you're trying to go on, and you're trying to say, I want everything internally right now, it's going to stop your growth journey. So that's where I see the value of agencies and partners like Code, where you're plugging into a model that already exists. You can make yourself go faster. And at that point, when you get to, I don't know, the point of critical mass, if that's the right way to put it, you can then start to say, well, can we start to hire to bring people back internally? But you've got that philosophy and that mindset that's already been ingrained from experts externally.
I think one of the other reasons that we're seeing now as well, or hearing that businesses are looking to partners for that coaching element, is it can be used as a bit of a retention tactic as well. You might have, a huge organisation, and there could be a particular discipline within that organisation that's falling or lagging behind some of the others. So let's take design as an example, just because that's been quite progressive over the last few years in terms of that breadth of skill set that's now expected. Bringing in a thought leader in that space to come in and support a huge discipline in developing them in, say, service design or whatever it might be, can be a real a real win for the company and keep people there a little bit longer. So we are definitely seeing, and as well, it's really hard to recruit at the minute for a lot of people. So bringing in someone and having that name there as being there, even though it's not permanent, can be a really good tactic for businesses to use.
Yeah, no, 100%. Great, thanks, guys. Right, I'm conscious of time. We're going to move on to the next thing. But that's a great series of answers there. So question 2 then. So how to maintain culture and employee engagement whilst working remotely. I think this is really interesting, this. I think we haven't even begun to scratch the surface of what this means, what remote working or remote first working means to business culture. We heard about, I think it was Twitter that very quickly during COVID said, right, we're going to be remote first now as an organization. So, in principle, you might not ever go to a place of work and actually share a traditional sort of business culture anymore. So I think that's fascinating. It's going to be a really emerging thing, I think, as we sort of see what post-COVID really means to us all. But who wants to take this one? So I think this is really interesting to me. Anyone got any strong opinions on that?
Sure. Well, I'll jump in first if you like. So the first thing I will say is this is a really big area of interest for me, because at the core of what we're talking about here is the culture of organizations, the operating model, but also the employee value proposition and what it means. So what I'd say is a suggestion is have a look at Forrester do a podcast on this, and McKinsey have done one, and it's fascinating some of the things they talk about. Now, the one thing I will say is they talk about remote working. They've called it their own thing. Every management consultancy gives it their own name because they want to brand it in their own terms. But the Forrester one was really, really interesting because it talked about a plethora of different changes, which included things like if you move to what they call is anywhere work. That's their term for it. So they're talking about it's hybrid working. It's a blend of in office and at home. Now, what they were talking about, and there's a US slant to this, but it's still applicable to the UK, where they were talking about, well, if you've got someone who's based in New York, you are paying a certain salary for that person, and you're paying a premium for them to live in the New York area. What they're saying off the back of COVID is people started to move out of the area, and they started to move into, neighboring states where the cost of living is much lower.
Yeah.
Now, they're the sort of things that they're starting to think about now, where it starts to really unravel and really start to think about what does that employee value proposition start to look like. And when you bubble it all the way to the top, it still start to impact the culture and engagement of your employees. The one thing I'll say, though, is that cultures of organizations will remain consistent. I think the way that you act out the behaviors of those cultures are what's being tested right now through COVID and through remote working. So the way that you go about actually delivering that culture is quite difficult. So I'll give you an example. You know, I worked in PZ Cousins, very collaborative environment, and used to get a lot of work done actually in corridors, speaking to people. You'd have your thought process jolted.
Yeah.
Now, when you're in an environment where everyone's remote, that's unbelievably difficult. It's unbelievably difficult, and you're looking at how you can put in place interventions to try and maintain that behaviour within the workplace. And it's it's incredibly tough. It's incredibly tough.
Yeah. Like, can you force the water cooler moment? That's the thing, isn't it? Like, is that something you can replicate online?
So I'll give you some anecdotal experience of what I was doing. So for me, I mean, as an organisation in PZ, what we were doing was staying in tune with our employees. So we were doing pulse surveys, and over time we were looking at what things were happening. I think what was really important for me though was maintaining that cohesion as a team. And where we started out was, look, we'll do 15-minute stand-up Monday, Wednesday, Friday. If we need them, we do them. If we don't, we don't.
Yeah.
For me, it was a great way to actually keep that connection together, to keep the ideation process, if you want to call it, flowing, and actually keep connections between people. And the idea is that will then spawn into, let's call them splinter conversations, where people go away and they might have a one-to-one conversation on Teams. But it was a way for us to try and remain and keep that cohesion as a team together.
Yeah.
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 But,
and did it work out? Like, what's I guess comparatively, what's the difference?
It's very different, if I'm honest. It's very, very different, but you can make it work. It's just a little bit alien at first. And, everyone's going to go through this journey. The biggest challenge that you've got right now is Teams and Zoom burnout. I can imagine people start shivering now when they see a Zoom call going or a Teams call. Like, oh God, another one. It's like your days are filled up with them. So for me, it's making sure you have that purpose of what you're going to discuss, and it's not like a BMW session where you're bitching, whining and moaning. You're actually coming in to talk about things that you want to try and drive forward, which sets a different precedent for what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
I think it's. Sorry, Leon, go.
Sorry, Gemma, after you.
No, you go. Fine.
Just to add to that, a point that I'm really concerned about is that culture of learning and that culture of vicarious learning or learning via osmosis, whatever point you want to touch to it. The 12 months that we've all been out of the office, what kind of impact is that going to have on people's learning and development? As you say, the little water cooler moments, the little moments you're sitting at your desk, you hear someone on the phone who's having quite an awkward conversation, but how they then got around the difficulty with what tactics they use. I think when in my 20s, I was in a big business and just learned so much just by using two ears and listening, and that osmosis learning that we're not having access to. I really struggle with what the next generation of talent and how we're going to really accelerate their learning when we get back to some semblance of normality.
I agree. I think the biggest challenge here is not so much technical skills, it's soft skills. And the challenge of isolation, it's talked about in the wider public, in the UK, and the effects of lockdown. I think the impacts on professional soft skills are really going to be found when you go back into the office. That openness to engage and collaborate, because let's be honest, I mean, most of the time we're sat in rooms on our own. Our only engagement is through a screen like this. It's a totally different way of engaging that's not akin to human nature. So it's going to be a pretty big shift, I think, when people go back.
I think that's where businesses have to sit down and really think about what that culture word means, because it's really, we've always found it really hard to articulate our culture, but we know we've got a great one without just quoting behaviours or big company events that you interpret as cultural markers, but actually might not be shared with everybody. I think one of the things that we did right at the start of lockdown, and we check back into regularly anyway, is think about all those different routines and rituals and the little pulses that happen in the company, and really think about why they happen. So old school, what is it you want people to take away? What is it you want them to hear from it? And then review them and say, right, well, how can you translate that into a remote situation? So as an example, how do you replicate being sat across the desk? So one of the things we introduced was virtual rooms that have got the same name as the desk that people are sat on, or they're called the same thing as the meeting rooms in the office. So Me and one of my colleagues who's actually on will hang out in the event space all day, virtually, not the physical one like we would normally do. And that's become a bit of like a drop-in room for us. I think that's where you almost need to not let the physical divide be an issue. You've got to find a way around it, because it's always going to be like this to some degree now. Like, we can't have that excuse. And I suppose the other thing that we did as well was think about, well, all those physical times of getting together that we think keep that tether to the company, you know, keep that engagement there between, like, say, the people and the, you know, the very senior leadership team. So like our MD, how can we replicate that? So we rolled out a load of other one-to-one meetings, so snug sessions where you can have a direct chat, or anonymous ask me boxes, you know, where you can ask anything, it'll be read out weekly in a town hall. So there's lots of like little things you can do. I think it's just really important they're not mandatory or forced, because like you say, you know, everyone's absolutely fed up of being back to back in Zoom meetings. So everything you do's got to be hinted and organic, not a mandatory thing, you know, not an organised quiz.
Yeah, I get that. And we've got, like, on a Friday we have like a little like drinks thing at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock or whatever it is. So like, yeah, again, like a bunch of folks will be in there, and that'll be different every Friday. But I think like one question I've got is around like retention of people. So I think when culture is really difficult to articulate and, you know, grasp onto right now, like what can you do about things like you know, sort of employee satisfaction, and maybe people not feeling as if they sort of belong to anything anymore? Like anything, any advice there from Adam or anybody else on that?
Yeah, I mean, two things on that. I think first and foremost, I think all businesses now have to really adopt a culture of care and really make sure that we are really checking in and being present with people and really asking exactly, how are you feeling? And not just doing that, oh, you know, on the Monday morning, oh, how are you doing? How's your weekend? Actually lead into that conversation and check in with people on a regular basis. That'll be, you know, that human element of being interested in people. Yeah. And I think secondly, cultures now have evolved from being, oh, we've got a great culture, we've got bean bags, we've got table tennis tables, we've got the jukebox type thing.
Got bean bags?
To you know, what people look for now is a culture of trust. You know, people want to work in an environment where they are trusted to do and deliver what they're being paid to do. Yeah. And how they are managed is against outcomes, so that these people now feel 100% empowered and accountable to delivery against what is expected of them. And that is what we're seeing, not only from an attraction perspective, but a retention perspective of great talent also.
I think just to build on that point as well, that's the role of the organisation. The role of a leader, I think, is even more important now around retention. You know, one of the things I always said to my guys was, look, you're empathetic to their challenge. You make sure that they are working the job, not the hours. So as Leon said, it's about driving outcomes. Yeah. But I think it's also having that level of transparency, because let's be honest, even as a leader, you're going through the same challenges they are. Yeah. And, you know, there's a line to draw of, you know, you don't want to be too open, but showing that actually you have the same challenges that they have, it creates a common point of interest. And at that point, you get that level of trust that then comes about, and, you know, the level of empathy between yourself and your team then just increases. And actually, I found that really, really helpful for me when I was going through the initial COVID bit where everyone was really struggling, and then over time we sort of became a bit of the norm. But you'd have people who are going up and down, and I think it's really important, the role of the leader and retention.
Yeah.
100%.
Definitely agree. I think one of the things that I've personally found most rewarding over the last probably 12 months is something as simple as like a Slack channel that's well, we've got Slack channels for everything, but we've got one that's for parents, and people just post like little funny anecdotes in there, and that's been a real tether to the people. I felt like that's been that connection to all of the different people who have got a similar experience to you right now. I've personally found that really engaging.
I mean, how many times has someone apologized when, you know, someone's son or daughter's walked in or the dog starts barking? And it's like, why are you apologizing? Now, this is the world and the culture we're living in now.
Yeah.
And if I'm honest, I found it really enlightening, because someone would walk up, and most of the time you'd see someone walk behind the camera, like the small kid, and they've not seen them coming. So you can see them walking up behind them. You're laughing and they're thinking, what's going on? And it just creates a different dynamic to the conversation.
It's real.
Lightens it up. Yeah, exactly.
Realness. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't think that should be lost in the current times, especially around remote working. We need to be a bit more, as I say, a bit more empathetic, but I think a little bit more relaxed about the surroundings that we're in.
A bit more human. I agree.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I agree. I think people will demand it stays. To be honest, I think it's been so liberating to live honestly and authentically, hasn't it?
Yeah.
You know, even if the dog's barking and the phone's ringing or whatever, like, it's just been really, like, for me anyway, I feel very similar to that. Yeah, and I feel actually in terms of like being a good employee, it's really been a really good time to have some clear thought as well. You know, yes, there's been a lot of noise with the kids being around or whatever, but actually coming back to your core role within an organization, or, you know, what are you trying to get out of this thing that you're doing every day? Like, I found a lot of good opportunities to get some clarity in all of this noise. So
I think sorry, Steve.
Oh, go on, Jen.
I was just going to say, I think the learning it's had an effect on the organisation as well, because I think what the organisations have realised is, and I think somebody said it a minute ago, it's about doing the job, not the hours. And I think companies have quickly realised that you don't need to have done 37.5 to have done your actual job. And we ourselves last year, we all stopped working on Friday afternoons to take an hours and pay cut. You know, we were struggling like everybody else. And we realised that actually productivity we didn't see any impact. So the natural thing for us to do then was say, right, well, we're never working Friday afternoons again. So now as an organisation, we don't do that. Friday afternoons are dedicated to improving yourself or the world around you. And it's that self-care dedicated time. So, you know, whatever you want to do with it, sit and watch a documentary, go to a museum when you can, or do some online learning, you know, that time's there. So I think it's been good for organisations actually, as well as the people. It's the jolt that they needed to see that actually you don't have to be present 9-5. Yeah.
100%. And these kind of initiatives, Jem, they drive employee engagement. People look forward to coming to work knowing that they've got on a Friday afternoon a bit of them time. And as you say, just tactics for attracting and retaining the very best people that we're all trying to do is that could be a point of difference between you and another competing agency to get that right person.
Yeah, definitely.
Great idea. Love it.
100%.
Well, I know for a while we were thinking about how do we get to that 4-day working week thing that seems to be the thing, but the 4.5-day week is a real success, I think, so far.
Yeah, stepping stone definitely to a 4-day or a do whatever day, just do your job. You know.
Yeah. Well, that was a really rich question. I'm really excited about all those that discussion, guys. So well done. But we have to move on with regret. So question 3. So how businesses are adapting their hiring strategies in the face of an agile future. So this is around really like not really knowing what skills you're going to need in the next 2 to 5 years. You know, the changing shape of the client organization in the last 5 years has been so dramatic that it's difficult to predict what that might look like. But yeah, you need to be sort of agile with your hiring strategy in order to create the right experiences right now, but also not sort of paint yourself into a corner, you know, as you come into the next couple of years. So I think Leon, you're probably best.
I'll kick off on this. From a recruitment perspective, what we're seeing, what our clients are adapting. So I think let's take ourselves back 12, 18 months. Pre-COVID, life was as it was. And recruitment was always in the top 3 key challenges. When I sat down with any business owner, MD, CEO, one of the top 3 challenges was finding the very best people. And finding them, attracting them, then entice them to join that business. Because there's a shortage, especially in the digital industry, and as we are continuing to see, there's a shortage of highly skilled people. And when you wanted that talent, it wasn't readily available. So it was a continual Achilles heel for us. Also, I think put yourself in certain geographical areas. If you've got a business in a remote area, you're going to have a very small talent pool to fish in. But then once you found the talent, how many times would we kick ourselves because it's taken us so bloody long to go through the interview process, and we've lost them because we couldn't get Bill in the interview that day, or when we did have the interview lined up, Jane's dog had to be taken to the vet and we had to delay it. You know, we look at the amount of wasted time and energy, and candidates get snapped up or they lose interest because going through the process, put yourself in a candidate's shoes. The candidate, the journey and the experience tells a lot about how a business operates. And time, as we know, kills all deals, especially in the recruitment industry and the talent industry. So let's fast forward to present day and post-COVID. A lot of those challenges still do exist. But the good news is that there have been some opportunities off the back of COVID that have meant that we can streamline and become better and more efficient at what we do. I mean, it's still very hard to find talent. In fact, one might argue it's harder than ever to find talent. And you probably ask yourself when there's more people on the marketplace. But if we're actually looking at it, when COVID hit last year, business owners, we had to look at where we could cut costs. And unfortunately, where we could cut costs from a headcount perspective, those cuts were made. And that's just the reality of the situation we're in. So yes, there are more people on the marketplace that are looking for jobs. But the reality is, are they the best people? In businesses like, you know, agencies and client side businesses, people are our greatest asset. And we as business owners or leaders in businesses will do what we can to ensure that we retain the best talent by having a rigorous 12-month development plan and a great remuneration package that is aligned with that, so that when headhunters like myself will come knocking on the door, they'll go, no, I'm happy where I am. I'm on this 12-month plan and I'm getting well paid for it. But in addition to that, there's a nervousness. The best people probably don't want to leave where they are at the moment. Who knows what's around the corner? There could be another economic dip, etc. Which means if they do leave, there's a scenario of last in, first out. So people are just edging the bets at the moment. But what this does mean is that we as businesses are all having to work harder to polish the vision, to really work on their culture, to really make sure the values that do exist within their business do chime with everyone and resonate, and is there a real purpose behind why they do what they do? But the good news is the positives about COVID. There are positives, guys. It's not all doom and gloom. The time to hire post-COVID now with this agile interviewing on Zoom or Teams or whatever platform has absolutely raised efficiency. The processes of hiring have been expedited, and businesses are hiring fast and hiring the best people. An example of that, a friend of mine runs an FMCG business in London. They were looking for a marketing director. Within the space of being introduced to this marketing director and hiring him was a space of a week. Ooh, and within that week, he had 7 hours of Zoom calls with 7 different people. And he also had 2 3-hour sessions over that week in person with various different people. Prior to COVID, that process could have taken 6 to 8 weeks or even more. That took a week. Which is astonishing when you actually look at it. So for me, that makes our job as recruiters a lot easier, because it means that we're not having to find out, can they do that time, they do that time, and get everyone in the same room. So that for me is really streamlined the process. There's no excuses to not be able to virtually meet. We talked about location no longer being an issue. The barriers to entry of needing someone to work 10, 15, 20 miles from the office, or candidates being able to commute 10, 20, 30 miles from the office are completely shattered now. So roles can now be fulfilled from anywhere, at any time, by anyone who's got the requisite skill set, which is fantastic. Another example of this, an agency that we know, a digital agency in Cornwall, you know, I mean, they've always struggled to find talent. They've now recruited a head of digital who's based out of London, who will come and spend a day or 2 per month in Cornwall. And this chap can't wait to get out of the metropolitan and get down there. And
it's a great job.
It's fantastic. And, you know, so that geography has been thrown out the window. Another upside is increasing diversity amongst workforces. We've seen BAME, LGBTQI plus communities have more opportunities presented to them, which has made that cultures are more enriching and the cultures have been added to. even working mums, for instance, who want to do part-time work or even job shares. Just more and more opportunities have been presented to people.
Sure.
And I guess the final point I've got is flexible working. We saw a stat the other day: 75% of employed people do not want to return to the office full time. I mean, what an amazing stat that is.
Yeah.
So that whole notion of presenteeism is totally outdated and obsolete. So the businesses now that embrace that will have that smorgasbord of talent that they can look at, as opposed to ones that don't embrace that will just have that smaller tranche to look at. So there's lots of great stuff that I'm seeing and we're seeing off the back of the last 12 months from a hiring and retention perspective.
I think the businesses some need a wake-up call as well. I suppose they're not as special as they think they are. There is definitely a value exchange going on there, and they do need to do more to attract people and compromise. Like, there's so many conversations that I have, and we still have at Code, we're not perfect, where we're trying to recruit unicorns, and that's on us to put in place more development from an onboard perspective as well, and stop looking for that perfect rounded human who ticks all the competency boxes of the role and as a great employee and as a got all the best soft skills in the world. Businesses do need to do more when somebody joins as well. I think that induction or that onboard is, in my experience, at every job I've ever had, has always been weak, or not as strong as it could be. So there is definitely opportunity to develop there as well, and to offer that, because that is a selling piece to a candidate.
Yeah, I think that onboarding piece as well now, Gemma, that lots of people that we've hired haven't met any of their colleagues ever in the last 12 months, even the interviewing process. So yeah, you say the onboarding process, that first week is make or break for probably people, whether they're going to make it in the business. And we've all been slack, we've all been lazy with that onboarding process, but now more than ever it's got to be absolutely rigorous to make sure that people feel part of the community that they've just joined.
For sure. And you can get, like you say, there's a lot of people looking for a lot of work. I think you can get hung up in that interview process of trying to find the absolute perfect one, and they could be 99% of the way there, and I don't know, they've just not got Scrum experience or whatever. So it's up to you then you can teach things like that. It's the stuff that are essential to your organisation. I suppose that values thing that you can't necessarily teach. They're the criticals that you should be recruiting against. But anything else, I think, up for grabs, fair game. Just find the right person who's going to, add something to your organisation.
Yeah. Just one last thing on me to you, Adam, is Leon, is are you seeing a difference between perm contracts and temporary contracts at the moment, or is that not a thing?
I think IR35, which is kicking in at the end of this month, is going to reduce the number of temporary people. So I think people are going to have to be a little bit more sensible whether they take a 6-month contract. But have we seen? I don't think we've seen much of a difference really over the past 12 months. There's always a need for great perm people, but there's always a need to add temporary people from a project by project basis into that. So not really, Stephen, short to answer that question.
No, that's okay. All right. Great. Right. Well, we'll move on to our last question. For those listening, I'd encourage you to ask a question now if you could, so we can prep around that for the last sort of 5 minutes or so. That'd be great. We would love to hear some of your questions and anything you want to talk about, or just come on screen and just ask the question yourself. That'd be cool as well. So I guess finally, and this is maybe a bit of a wrap-up question to some extent. So how do we create efficiencies with the people and processes that we've already got? So we're going to find increasingly, I suppose, businesses wanting to get the most out of the people they've got. They'll want to either upskill them or repurpose them in some way, because they're not going to be able to spend loads of money on talent, but actually they've got some really aggressive goals to hit based on what could have been a particularly disastrous year last year.
So does anyone want to kick that off in terms of how to create efficiencies with the folks you've already got?
Yeah, I can kick that off. So I think there's probably two angles to look at it. There's a team angle and team efficiency, and then there's an organisational angle. I think in terms of approaching the team, there's loads of different ways you can do that, and loads of different businesses, depending on their setup, will have scorecards or whatever embedded. I think the key thing is understanding what you think it means to be an effective team. What works for somebody like Code won't work for a different organisation. For example, we measure our team's effectiveness on client centricity and their commercial performance and their adoption of lean, just as an example, whereas that might not work for somebody else. Yeah. I think from an organisational standpoint, that's probably not the most important, but just as important to get right, because this is going to be a real killer if you're hoping to expand into, I don't know, new territories, or you're hoping to grow out new teams, because all that inefficiency just gets inherited otherwise. Because if you've got organisational inefficiency, that cuts across everything. So yeah. I think the first thing is it's really important to decide what it means to be effective to you if you're a business. And then I think the second thing is establish a way of measuring that effectiveness and looking at how you can embed that into teams so it's checked into and improved upon and so on.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And things like, I know a lot of businesses, certainly traditional ones, are starting to adopt things like lean for the first time. Like, I know we've helped a couple of businesses sort of going through that process or trying to get through that process. Like, what would you suggest, Gemma, in terms of if that was something that someone was wrestling with? Like, what's the first steps on that journey?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good question. I think the first thing, so one of the first things that we do as a partner who would be coming in to look at how we improve your adoption of lean or agile or whatever it is, would be to do almost like an assessment of where the teams are up to now. So that's from a team level and from a discipline level. So the adoption of lean principles will cut through the team and then at a discipline level. So for example, QA versus front end, back end, delivery and so on. So I think the first thing is do an assessment of where you are now. You'll establish what you think are the markers of being a successful lean business. Do an assessment where you are, prioritise and work out who and what you're going to do to develop in the different areas and how you're going to embed that on an ongoing basis. So what routines or processes are you going to put in place to keep checking back into it?
Yeah, and in terms of like, where's that driven from normally? Is that driven out of marketing or is that driven out of IT? Like how does that look typically?
I think it'll vary dependent on business to business. I think you need buy-in across a lot of different areas really. So the discipline leaders, whoever they are, or the department leaders need to buy in. And then if your technical teams, and that's who you're looking at, sit within an IT function or a marketing function, you need buy-in from whatever team they form part of as well. Really, I think change, I'm probably more of a firm believer that change comes from the bottom up, the top down, and you get like this nice fruition of it somewhere in the middle. I don't think it can just be mandated from the teams or mandated from leadership.
I agree with that. Yeah, you have to have people who buy into the vision, but actually enjoy working within those operating mechanics. No one wants to feel like things are being forced upon them, and especially in agile, it is incredibly powerful. But it's a mindset shift, and when you're going through that mindset shift, there's always a little bit of resistance. And I've got loads of experiences where people are, I Prince 2 or Lean Six Sigma, and then they do 2 sprints and they go, wow, my perspective has completely changed on what agile actually is, and the adoption then goes through the roof. It's what you talked about earlier. It's learning by doing. You become comfortable being uncomfortable. Give it a go. And actually, you realise actually it is very, very powerful when you get into it.
Yeah, for sure.
I agree. Right. All right, guys. Conscious of time. Any questions? I'm going to close this down now, this screen share thing. temporarily.
I think some have been coming through, Steve. So if you go into the chat box.
Have they? Excellent. Let me see what's what then. I can't. You feel free to read them out because I can't see it.
So I've got any examples of routines teams could adopt to create efficiencies in their day-to-day. I think depending on where at team, I'm using a technical team here just because, you know, that's largely what we deal with. But I think depending on where they are on the journey, I think the first thing to look at is introducing a routine where you just, so a retro, where you reflect back on a period of time. There's lots of little micro things you could do. So, you know, somebody could be accountable for looking at all of the blockers in the last 10 days and summarising the root cause of them all. And then you could have an open chat about that. I think the key thing is probably starting really small and simple if it's your first time looking at inefficiencies before, you know, start getting to the real data heavy you know, crunching numbers of people utilization and what they've spent time on. So just make it simple to start with.
Just to, I think to build on that, my one bit of advice is just ruthless prioritization, and you know, no more than 3 to 5 tops. Anything more than that, and it's not prioritization. You're just going to spread your effort too thin. You get disillusioned because you're not getting things done. So for me, ruthless prioritization. If you can get to 3, perfect. 3 key items that you want to work through, and that will then start to drive efficiencies, because you'll be asking yourself the question, is this really important to us right now? Are we going after things that we either want to do or we're being drawn to because someone's shouting the loudest?
Yeah, exactly that. I think
An urgent box, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So prioritization is key.
Yeah, I agree. And I think doing these regular review meetings are undoubtedly the most of everyone's time. I think doing regular reviews of where you're spending your time in those meetings. We worked for TUI, a huge organisation, and found that they were having 5 separate meetings with the same agency each week, just with different departments. Like, any ways you can synchronise what's going on there will just help. So have a look back at what you're doing with your week.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, like starting small is really good. I think having something that's really impactful to the business that the board can get excited about, just as well as the team that's delivering it can get excited about. I think finding those like sweet spots where, you know, everyone can sort of lean into it and see the value of doing things differently. Because that's what it's all about, actually. That thing about mindset is 100% true. You know, it does take a lot of work, but if you can ring fence a thing and some people and get really excited about delivering something in a short window as well, make it a 2 or 3 month kind of a win, then I think that's a really good way to go about changing some of these things.
Yeah. It's just one question of Charlotte, which is, with regards to formalised coaching and mentoring in the business, do you feel with the remote hybrid working models, businesses or agencies, this will become necessary, and what are your thoughts on how it's delivered? I can answer this just from our experience right now, which is all of the remote coaching and training that we've been doing. The key feedback that we've had is everyone's really enjoyed it, took a lot from it, felt like they've got the same out of it from a learning perspective, but really missed that personal connection and felt like there wasn't enough time to get into the real detail of their specific scenario. So I think that's the main hindrance that we're going to have to find a way of getting over. And that might just be making everything, I don't know, twice as long, because you need that personal bit at some point, or having one-to-one spin-offs. But in terms of like the core learning, we've not found that's been impacted too much. A couple more.
My team's broken, so you'll have to read them out, Jem. Sorry.
All right, it's all right. What onboarding activities would you recommend for someone who's starting straight from home or hybrid model after recruitment?
I'll take that one if you like. So I had experience of this when COVID first happened. Went through the interview process. I had one face-to-face interview, but then everything else was done remotely. all the way through a 12-month contract. I'd only seen this person one time. So what we essentially set up was a framework on the fly. And I'll be honest, what we said was, these are your priorities, top 3 priorities. These are the people that you need to meet. So a very thorough onboarding process. Now, typically, you might say when someone joins the business, you would get them to actually reach out to those people. Now, because you can't interact in an office and you can't walk around and find someone, what I was actually doing was taking on the responsibility of, look, this person's coming into the business. They're going to be working for you as a stakeholder. So make sure you're available to actually meet them and do, form part of the induction plan. What I also did then was, off the course of the first, and it depends on the person, the first couple of weeks, we were just doing end of day catch-ups, 10, 15 minutes. Tell me how your day's gone. Is there anything I can help you with? Is someone making time available for you? Whatever it may be, and help to break down some of those blockers. Now, depending on the level of seniority, the person need longer. Some people might need shorter, but I actually found that was quite an effective way to get them on board and actually get them delivering quicker and feel like they're integrated into the business much quicker.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And we frequently do check-ins, check-outs, a virtual coffee, get the people responsible for setting up the inductions to do it, and putting the onus on as many other people other than the individual in those first few weeks, the better. I think having a quite a detailed what you want to achieve at the end of weeks 1, 2, 3 plan as well helps just keep you all focused.
And I think someone just mentioned it on the thread as well, having an informal buddy system.
Yep.
Where it's just a check-in with a pal, how you doing? Is there anything I can help you with? That sort of thing. Just a bit of a sanity check works really well.
Yeah. One last question from Mark, which was, how do you deal with people who just aren't up to the job?
Just like him.
Someone said that without moving their lips.
Wasn't me.
Thanks for answering that, Jem. I can go now.
Honestly. I think the trickiest bit of that, if I'm honest, is quite often businesses forget to put that effort in to really articulate what's expected of the person. And if you've not done that, and you've not got those competencies written down and, really communicated or had that exchange with the individual to make sure they know what's expected of them, you can't then manage any challenges you're having with how they perform in the job. So even if you're on the back foot and, somebody's not necessarily performing, then that's gut feel. You then have to do that exchange with them to write down where you think they've not, tell them where you need to see, and in a really clear time frame. And then you can start a formal process if they still don't deliver, but otherwise you're a bit screwed.
So I mean, I'm just looking at the comments here and what Claire's put. For me, regular engagement and feedback with positive and constructive feedback, I think, is really important. I think the minute, and this obviously depends on the character of the person, I think that's really important, because you'll get some people who are open to constructive feedback, you'll get some people who go extremely defensive. In that case, it can get quite tough, and it can get quite tough. And I think at that point, it needs to be very structured and factual in the way that you actually deliver it, as Gemma said, against competencies, against objectives, against goals that you're looking to deliver. But there also is a level of empathy as a part of this as well, where you want to understand why someone isn't delivering to why essentially why they're falling short. And there can be many different factors. There could be things outside of work. There could be, as I say, internal stakeholders, we're calling them challenges. And then sometimes they could just be, actually, you're not the right person the organization needs right now. And at that point, you have to look at a graceful way to resolve the situation. And, in that third scenario, it's never nice. But actually, what I've found is sometimes you are actually setting people free to actually go into a different direction that they're going to be most comfortable with. So the way I'd always look at that is, look, it's not really a good fit right now, but this is how we're going to help you to move on to the next. Because when you go through that process, it can be quite tough, can't it? Let's be honest. You don't want to crush people on the way out the door. So that would be my advice.
How are you doing?
Absolutely. Right, we're 3 minutes past the hour, so I think we're over time, everybody. I think we'll wrap it up there, I suppose. Thank you very much. Panelists, you were amazing. Gemma, awesome. Leon, Anthony, really thank you for your time. hopefully that was useful. As Jain said on the chat, we're going to post this on to our channels later, so you can always review it if you need to. And go to codecomputerlove.com/events, then you'll be able to sign up to future events and see what else we're talking about in April. So until then, thanks to the panel, thanks for you guys for contributing, and we'll see you soon.
Today.